Upon Lisa's arrival, I immediately observed a particular demeanor that suggested she had informed me of her intention to work late. While it's possible she did work late, I sensed that her involvement extended beyond the scope of her professional responsibilities. How was I able to discern this? Part of it was intuition, and part of it was the expression on her face and her nervous mannerisms. Upon returning home that evening, I discovered that Lisa was an inept poker player. I possess a superior poker face and did not reveal to her that I suspected her of wrongdoing. Instead, I retained the services of a private investigator. I sought tangible evidence to corroborate my suspicions that Lisa and I were both 27 years of age. I had initially met her during our senior year of college. We dated for 2 years before getting married. I believed that we had similar values and that we both believed in total fidelity to each other. Before we married, I made it clear that I would consider cheating a deal-breaker. Unfortunately, up until now, I had assumed that our life together was ideal. I am not the kind of man who is so consumed by his career that he neglects his wife. On the contrary, I consistently demonstrated my affection for her through the purchase of flowers and other gifts. I took her out on dates and made sure she was well-fed and sexually satisfied, as I have a high libido. I have been informed that I am a good husband. I take care of my appearance and engage in regular exercise to maintain my physical fitness. I recognize that I possess certain shortcomings, yet providing for my wife was never one of them. Lisa was not a conventionally attractive woman, yet she possessed a pleasant physical appearance and a well-proportioned figure. While her breasts were not particularly large, they were not small either. Lisa was employed as a paralegal at a highly regarded law firm. She typically returned home at the end of the workday, but occasionally had to work late on an important case. I am employed in the high-tech industry and earn a substantial income. Lisa came from a fairly affluent background. Her father was the proprietor of a substantial ranch in Texas, which had been discovered to contain oil reserves. He had insisted that we enter into a prenuptial agreement, which included the stipulation that in the event of a divorce, none of the assets accumulated prior to our marriage could be accessed. Additionally, any inheritance from family members was similarly exempt. I was not concerned about the financial aspects of the marriage, so I had no objection to signing the prenuptial agreement. I had never been particularly fond of Lisa's father, who was a staunch racist and frequently made disparaging remarks about black people and Mexicans. However, I did not observe this same trait in Lisa. Given that we lived a considerable distance from them and did not interact with them regularly, I was comfortable with the arrangement. I hired a private investigator who was a personal acquaintance of mine to conduct surveillance. The private investigator had previously been employed to uncover evidence of infidelity on behalf of his client. He had been impressed with the efficiency of this individual, and on the day following my initial suspicion of wrongdoing, I was in the investigator's office, outlining my requirements. Once the retainer had been accepted, the investigator commenced work on the case. It took my wife several days after what I believed to be her first instance of infidelity. It was time for her to resume her extramarital activities in order to return to a state of equilibrium. I had continued to act in the role of a loving husband, and she evidently believed that she had evaded detection. It was precisely a week later that I received a telephone call from her, informing me that she had to work late again. I contacted the private investigator and informed him that, upon her return, she appeared to be somewhat guilty, although not as obviously as on the previous occasion. It seems that she was becoming accustomed to the notion that I would not discover her infidelity and that she could act with impunity. The following day, I received a call from the investigator, which corroborated my suspicions. She was engaging in sexual intercourse with a male colleague of hers, and they were doing so in the offices after everyone else had departed for the day. The male colleague had apparently taken photographs of them through the window. From the building across the street, the images were not entirely clear. The investigator inquired as to whether I wished for him to continue with the case. I requested that he attempt to obtain video footage of the incident. He informed me that this could be done, but that it would require additional resources. As I was not financially constrained, I instructed him to proceed with the video recording. Regarding my own involvement, I was compelled to seek medical attention due to a sudden onset of gastric distress. This prevented me from engaging in sexual activity. I informed Lisa that I had not engaged in sexual intercourse with my wife. However, I was concerned that I might have contracted an STD from her. I then initiated my plan. One of my shortcomings is that I enjoyed playing poker. I would occasionally play with friends, approximately once a month. I typically emerged from these games with a profit, which I considered satisfactory for an amateur. Additionally, I played poker online. The stakes were relatively modest, with buy-in games offering a maximum of $5 and $10. Over time, we had accumulated a modest fortune of approximately $200,000. However, due to my significant contributions, I was reluctant to share this wealth with Lisa. This is where online poker came into play, utilizing my expertise and skills. I created 5 untraceable accounts on a poker site, allowing me to play against myself. To conclude, I proceeded to engage in head-to-head matches, ultimately losing to myself. While the site did levy a rake for each game, the amount was less than what Lisa would receive in a divorce settlement. It would be less incriminating if I lost all our money to 5 other players than to just one. The online poker site I used was not based in the United States, and was therefore unlikely to divulge any information about its clients. It took approximately a week, but by then I had successfully cleaned out our bank accounts. Once again, the accounts were cleared of all but $10,000. Exactly 1 week later, Lisa called to say she had to work late. I contacted the private investigator to inform him that he had successfully covered his tracks this time. When my wife returned home, there was hardly any trace of guilt. The following morning, I received a call from the private investigator, who informed me that he had obtained the evidence I sought. I proceeded to his office and retrieved the DVD. He informed me that he could provide me with a written report within a couple of days, if I so desired. However, I informed him that this should be sufficient. I proceeded to remunerate him for his time and advised him that I would contact him if I required any further assistance. He expressed his regret regarding the circumstances that had transpired. I responded by stating that he had no reason to be remorseful, as he was not the individual who had been unfaithful to me. I then collected the DVD and proceeded to return to my place of work, where I secured myself within my office. I informed my assistant that I did not require any assistance and proceeded to play the video. I was not experiencing any feelings of nervousness. I had already been aware of the infidelity and believed that this information would not alter my circumstances. The video had been recorded using a concealed camera within the legal practice and was of a high quality, with clear audio. I am unsure of the methods employed by the private investigator to obtain this footage and do not wish to inquire further. My sole concern was to obtain what I desired. I had never met the individual in question, yet the private investigator had furnished me with a plethora of information about him. I was aware of his marital status and the fact that he had 2 children. Furthermore, I knew who his parents were and where he had grown up. However, I had not been privy to the information that only became apparent when I viewed the video, namely that the individual was of African descent. I had not viewed the initial images captured by the private investigator, nor had I been informed by the private tutor that my wife's partner was of African descent. At this juncture, I am aware of the assumption that I pursued a larger partner. However, upon observing him, I noted that he was not notably more physically endowed than I was, and possibly even slightly smaller in stature. I viewed the video with a sense of detached objectivity, having already experienced a loss of emotional attachment. I am aware of individuals who have occupied a similar position to my own and who have subsequently become emotionally unstable. They sought to understand why their spouse had behaved in such a manner. However, I was not concerned with this aspect. My primary concern was that my wife had indeed behaved in this way, and that was the extent of my interest. I was not concerned with the reasons behind her actions. One detail that did strike me was the absence of any mention of me or my wife during their relationship. The sexual encounters were not particularly noteworthy. They consisted of a brief oral sex act and then he would leave. One notable aspect was the mention of the partners of the law firm. After viewing the video, I informed my superior that I required a week's leave to attend to personal matters. We had a cordial relationship and I outlined the situation to him, requesting his assistance in covering my duties. I explained that I needed to be out of town for several days, during which time he had caught his former partner. The husband had discovered that his wife had been unfaithful to him 2 years previously and was extremely sympathetic. He informed me that he believed he could find a more suitable partner and provided me with a list of customers based outside the state who he felt I should contact. This gave me a legitimate reason to be absent from work and meant that I did not even have to use my vacation time. I proceeded to leave the premises at an early hour and returned to my residence, where I packed a suitcase. I then contacted my wife and informed her that one of our customers in another state had encountered a significant crisis with their computer systems, necessitating my presence in that location to address the issue. This was not an entirely uncommon occurrence, as I did occasionally undertake business-related travel. However, it was not a frequent occurrence. She informed me of her affection and expressed her longing for my presence, urging me to return promptly. I merely stated that I needed to hasten my departure to catch my flight. It is uncertain whether she discerned that I had not reciprocated her feelings. I secured a flight out of state and initiated the subsequent phase of my plan. I proceeded to create multiple copies of the video and subsequently place them within envelopes, ensuring that the recipient would have no reason to suspect my involvement. I then dispatched these items via overnight delivery to an acquaintance from my college days, who resided on the East Coast. I had previously contacted this individual, requesting a favor. I informed him that he would receive a box, which he was to open and then post, ensuring that the postmark reflected the location from which it was sent. A box was sent via next-day delivery. The recipient was instructed to open it and remove each mailer, which he was then to post. The postmark was to indicate the point of origin. I was situated in a location where I could be observed by witnesses, and I was engaged in work that required my presence in that location. I am aware that the plan I devised may appear to be overly elaborate. It was a somewhat clandestine and circuitous approach, and if events unfolded as I anticipated, it was arguably excessive. However, I was determined to ensure that my actions could not be traced back to me. I sent a video to every individual I could identify who worked for the law firm that Lisa was employed by. I also sent copies to other relevant parties. The videos were sent to the following individuals and locations: my wife's parents, the pastor of the church where my wife attended services, and copies to all of her former friends with whom I was able to establish contact. Additionally, the videos were sent to all of our current friends. I am aware that many individuals would be embarrassed to receive such a package. The objective was to have their friends become aware that their wives were unfaithful to them, rather than me. I was positioned as the innocent victim. The last video was sent to my home address with a list of amateur sites where I had anonymously posted it for all to see. By Thursday, the consequences began to manifest. I am not privy to the full details of the situation, but I am aware that my wife and her lover were summoned to their superior's office, shown the video, and promptly dismissed from their positions. Subsequently, my wife began to receive calls from her friends, who had viewed the video. My father contacted her and berated her in a highly aggressive manner, forbidding her from contacting him or her mother in the future. On Friday, I received a telephone call from two acquaintances, who inquired as to whether I was aware of the existence of the videos in question. I informed them that I was currently out of town on business and was therefore unaware of the situation. They proceeded to inform me of the events that had transpired. It was encouraging to observe that some of my acquaintances exhibited a greater degree of loyalty than my unfaithful wife. I subsequently contacted my residence, and the individual who answered the phone seemed visibly distressed. Upon answering the phone, Lisa was informed about the calls from friends regarding the video. She was then told that she should leave by the time he returned from the airport, where he was flying home. She was advised to seek legal counsel. Upon his return, Lisa had already departed, having packed only a few belongings. I subsequently discovered that she had a friend who had divorced her and was allowing her to stay with them. As it transpired, this friend had divorced her because she had been unfaithful. I instructed a lawyer and initiated the divorce proceedings. I informed Lisa that I had no intention of ever seeing her again, and that the only communication I would have with her would be through our respective lawyers. Lisa's lawyer was unresponsive. Following the public dissemination of information, the majority of legal professionals were reluctant to represent her. It is probable that her employer had disseminated information indicating that she was persona non grata. When I listed our assets at $10,000, she expressed displeasure. However, I had sufficient evidence to prove that I had gambled away the remainder and had done so prior to becoming aware of her infidelity. Our remaining asset was the house, but given the decline in the real estate market, we would be in a negative equity position upon its sale. We had only been living there for 3 years, and Lisa was unaware of this fact. She obtained a court order to sell the house and split the proceeds. I was indifferent to this outcome, as I had no intention of remaining in the house. Given my inability to afford the mortgage payments due to my unemployment, I was compelled to pay $8,000 to settle the remaining mortgage balance following the sale of the property. Consequently, our net worth was reduced to $2,000. Additionally, she initiated legal proceedings for alimony. The final judgment ruled that her lack of employment was a consequence of her own volition, despite her capacity to work, and thus denied her alimony. I provided her with a check for $1,000. She was indebted to her lawyer for an amount exceeding that sum. She had caused her own downfall and was now impoverished, virtually isolated, and without familial or social support. She was aware that she would never be able to work in our city again, as this had become a widely known scandal. She was therefore forced to relocate to another state. I threatened to sue the law firm that Lisa had worked for on the grounds that they should have been aware of the situation between two employees who were married to other individuals. The individuals in question were engaging in the illicit activity in their own offices, apparently during work hours. I reached a settlement of $300,000, which they promptly paid to put an end to the matter. They were keen to avoid any further negative publicity that might further tarnish their reputation. I then proceeded to withdraw funds from my online poker account and recovered the majority of my losses, along with the proceeds from the aforementioned settlement. Overall, I emerged from the experience with a significant financial gain. I would have gladly given up all of my winnings to have retained them. He had a loving and faithful wife, but he was unable to alter that reality. Over the past few years, he had gained insight into Lisa's situation. She was employed as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. It appeared that whenever she applied for a more lucrative position, a copy of her infamous video would mysteriously arrive at the company she had applied to. It is likely that a spouse who has been unfaithful and engaged in inappropriate behavior within the workplace, while on the job, does not present a favorable image on a resume. I am acquainted with several women who engage in sexual relationships with men other than their husbands. I am uncertain whether I will marry again. My parents and both of my grandparents have maintained long-lasting marriages. Perhaps I will meet a suitable partner. I will inform her of my views on infidelity, despite the fact that such behavior has not benefited me or Lisa. This concludes the narrative. If you found it engaging, please indicate your appreciation with a positive rating and consider subscribing to receive further content of a similar nature.